Hey, this is George. This is a video on the 2024 Cats Hill Classic. This was the day before Santa Cruz, if you saw the previous video I made. And this one had a massive field that mixed five different categories together. They mixed in the Cat 3s, Cat 4s, Collegiate A's, Collegiate B's, and Masters 35 plus 3/4s, which is way too many categories for one field in my opinion. Even though like the fours and the collegiate categories didn't have a ton of riders, still it just didn't really make sense, especially considering the caliber of racers in this collegiate field, um, which I'll talk more about in a bit. First thing I want to really talk about is the main feature of this course, which you're about to see. I'm gonna sort of corner into this incredibly steep hill. I believe it hits about 23%. I mean, you can just tell by the GoPro footage how ridiculously steep it is. And I mean, you can see I'm doing like 600 watts and basically staying in the same spot. I think pretty much every time I went up at least above 450 and most of the time above 500 watts on that hill, which is quite absurd. For this race, I'm racing in the Collegiate A category, and I'm racing for Stanford, and my plan is to race for my teammate Jack, who is a sprinter. He's right in front of me. He's my only teammate in this race. The big hitters in this race are Cal Poly, who that's Maddie right in front of me. That's the guy that I'm worried about on their team. And then from UCSC on my right there, that's Quinn Felton. He's a U23 pro for Avolo, and he's been getting some really good results in Europe, and so naturally I'm really worried about him too. And this sort of highlights one key issue I have with how collegiate races are often organized in the US, where they'll often group the collegiate A's with like a Cat 3 field or even a 3/4 field, like in this case. And I think that doesn't make a lot of sense because the strongest guys in the collegiate A's are Cat 1s, and even pros are allowed to race in the category. So I think it doesn't make sense to group that in with like a Cat 4 who's going to have much less experience, much less pack skills. That wide skill differential could cause some safety issues, and it could also cause some safety issues because you need to let like the Cat 4s race each other, but you've got Collegiate A's that are probably going to be lapping the field. And yeah, this race wasn't pulling lapped riders, which made things sketchy because you're coming around them with a large speed differential, especially into corners, and I experienced that with some of the Masters riders. Anyways, that's Antonio from San Jose State that just passed me on the right. He's the last of the riders in the Collegiate A field. Now that I've gone over all the teams in this race, let me skip to the interesting part of the race so you can see how it shakes out. Okay, so now we're about 15 minutes into the race, and right here, Antonio sends an attack, and I'm in perfect position to follow. And I decide to follow this because Antonio's a really strong breakaway rider. He's a strong collegiate rider, um, and the collegiate field's pretty small, so I want to make sure that we're represented in anything that goes with a collegiate rider. Additionally, you can't see this on my camera because I don't have a rear camera, but we have a Cal Poly guy with us too, so that's most of the big collegiate teams that are in this race. Unfortunately, we do have, I think, one or two non-collegiate riders with us, but I mean, from the collegiate field, the only person who would be chasing us back now is probably Quinn. You're gonna see the Cal Poly guy right about here decides to go around, and he kind of attacks over this hill, which kind of already should have told me how this was gonna go, because from the very beginning, instead of having one cohesive break of four riders, we're now in like two separate groups with Antonio and I, and then the two riders up ahead. That called Poly rider is a collegiate B, so I mean, it's not like that's the race in front of me, but still, the dysfunctionality is not something that you want to see, especially this early into a break. It's kind of the writing's already on the wall, really. But I'm gonna, do some work to try to stitch things back together and see if I can create a cohesive unit out of this. It's gonna take us a full lap to catch the first of the two riders that went off the front. Um, That's Max racing for Team Mike's Bikes. Although I think he was in the Collegiate B because he also races for UC Berkeley. Um, we also have one more guy with us from Team California to hopefully help stitch things together. Unfortunately, nobody really seemed to want to rotate. Antonio was doing a big effort on the front to try to bring this back, but it still took over a lap for us to catch the Cal Poly guy. We do start rotating a bit after we catch the Cal Poly guy because remember, we're still in a break. We were chasing him, but we were still off the front. But at this point, like we've all kind of gassed ourselves a bit going up the hill, and also just like the dysfunction has meant that now it's going to be a lot harder for us to reestablish order. Somewhat surprisingly, no one really tried to attack at the top of the hill here, but instead what we did is we all kind of looked at each other a little bit, and nobody really wanted to take the front here. And at this point, I was looking back and I could tell the group was already making their way up the hill, and the gap was not very big, so I think nobody wanted to pull because they kind of knew that we were about to get caught. I mean, this Cal Poly guy kind of takes a mini pull, but in just a few seconds, I mean, that's his teammate, Maddie, that's in the main group, trying to attack, and then there's a bunch of other riders in the main group. So this break is over, unfortunately. But even though we got caught, it's not like this was a complete failure for me. I mean, part of the reason I got into that break was that I knew that if I were off the front with Antonio, that Jack wouldn't have to do any effort to chase him back. Whereas if I hadn't been in that group, then Jack and I might have had to both do pretty big efforts on the front to try to chase it back, and then Jack's legs wouldn't be quite as fresh for the sprint. So now Jack should be pretty fresh, but I'm pretty gassed, so I'm going to try to sit in the field and recover a bit, and hopefully I can get some legs back in time to lead out Jack for the sprint. However, I made a bit of a mistake and got too far back, and if you look, you can kind of see that a split's already starting to form, and I'm on the wrong end of it. And it becomes even more apparent here that a split has definitely formed, and especially on this course, it's going to be hard for that split to get back together. And it doesn't, partially because I'm so gassed, and partially because I was making mistakes. I mean, I end up in an even smaller group just because everyone's tired and it's just completely shattered at this point. So my race is pretty much over. Jack ended up getting second, which is a great team result in such a stacked field. Maddie ended up winning. Props to him. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. As always, like and subscribe. It's standard YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.